In a battlefield of words and reputations, a shocking conflict emerged: Kadyrov versus Shamanov. This clash transcended mere ambition, shaking the very foundations of a long silent military hierarchy. For the first time in years, high-ranking generals found the courage to voice their opinions about an individual previously deemed untouchable. Shamanov, a war hero and a legendary paratrooper from the Chechen Wars, stood boldly against Kadyrov, a figure synonymous with fortitude and independence, who once commanded attention across the nation. But when Shamanov grasped the microphone to address a captivated audience, he unleashed fierce accusations against Kadyrov's actions, suggesting they endangered the very people they claimed to protect. The tension crackled in the air, revealing divisions deep within a system once viewed as unified. This was not merely a quarrel but an eruption of dissent from within the military itself, signaling a new era where silence no longer reigned. To grasp the weight of Shamanov's words, one must recognize his status. He is more than a general, he is a celebrated commander, a figure etched in the annals of modern military history. His legacy was forged on the blood-soaked grounds of Afghanistan and Chechnya, leading troops through harrowing battles and campaigns. Over time, he transitioned to politics, becoming a figure revered by war veterans who saw in him a symbol of unwavering bravery. Contrast this with Kadyrov's dual existence as a controversial leader of Chechnya and a person skilled in navigating the murky waters of power. When he faced Shamanov's accusations, he slipped into the rhetoric of a besieged general, throwing around sinister allegations of murder and treachery and aggression designed both to intimidate and assert dominance. However, this moment felt different. Kadyrov's words appeared to resonate more as a desperate defense than an effective counterattack. In an unexpected twist, silence followed Kadyrov's threats. Days passed without a reply from his usual supporters or the brash displays of strength he often exhibited. It was as if a seismic shift had occurred within the consciousness of his followers. Reports circulated that even the most loyal media figures were noticeably avoiding the subject of Shamanov, suppressing any dissenting sentiments. Was this the beginning of a fracture in Kadyrov's once unassailable facade? The conflict between these two figures marked a significant turning point, provoking not only military veterans but also the broader Russian public to re-evaluate allegiances. As Shamanov pointedly called out the failures of Kadyrov from the steps of the Duma, an echoing silence enveloped the chamber. Not a single representative dared to respond, leaving a vacuum that spoke volumes. This conflict is more than a clash of personalities, it represents a split in the very fabric of the Russian military establishment. The silence following Shamanov's speech signifies a critical pivot, a moment when those who once lived in the shadows of fear began to claim their voices. As the tide shifts and the whispers grow louder, the question looms: what will be the ultimate cost of this confrontation between a war hero and a controversial leader? Can Kadyrov maintain his grip over his image and power, or will Shamanov's call for accountability ignite a movement that demands change from within? The stakes have never been higher. As the conflict between Kadyrov and Shamanov escalated beyond mere rivalry, here begins the tale of a seasoned general rising against a powerful leader. Have you ever wondered how a war hero's words could shatter a system thought unbreakable? Picture the heavy air in the State Duma, thick with unspoken tensions, as Vladimir Shamanov, a true legend of the airborne forces, stood firm and spoke out. Shamanov's voice, seasoned by years in battle, carried the gritty texture of truth, unfiltered and raw. Those who knew him cherished his honesty, a sharp blade against deceit. He fought not for glory, but for what was right, standing tall even when controversy swirled around him, entangling Kremlin insiders. For the veterans, the ones who bled on the front line, he was no mere bureaucrat, he embodied the frontier warrior, the shield of the forgotten. When he climbed the podium, his words echoed like thunder, exposing cracks in the very foundations of power. What ignited this feud? The stakes involved pivotal strongholds: Norsky, Shokovsky, and Cernovodsky, renamed to honor Russian Cossacks in the wake of devastating Caucasian wars. These places, once scarred by Chechen villages turned to ash, became symbols, for Moscow, bureaucratic trophies, for Kadyrov, emblems of rebirth. But for Shamanov, they struck deep as slaps to the ghosts of fallen comrades, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to memories of brutal losses. Enraged, the Kadyrov parliament decreed a reversion, back to Chechen names, erasing the past. Then came the defiance. A united Russia deputy, with Moscow backing, pushed the proposal further. Shamanov's response? He marched to the podium, no notes, no shields, driven by unyielding passion. His words sliced through. What do you think? You write the Russian-speaking populace and erase the story? The microphone crackled under his grasp. A deathly hush fell over the hall, no movement, no rebuttal from Kadyrov's allies. The video spread like wildfire on Telegram and social feeds, igniting debates. Who could have foreseen this clash between titans? One, a war conqueror, the other, the architect of post-battle authority. Kadyrov retaliated swiftly, his fury unleashing accusations of Shamanov's atrocities against the Chechen people, calling for tribunals and courts. He demanded apologies, his voice booming with familiar aggression. Imagine the weight of unspoken threats hovering in the air, yet Kadyrov chose restraint, issuing only a measured statement, subtle, scripted, as if drawn by legal lines. No flashy videos, no armored displays, no personal confrontations. This restraint signaled something unprecedented, not offense, but defense, a hint of vulnerability in the predator's gaze. Days passed in eerie silence, no echo from Chechen voices, no orchestrated frenzy. Why did the usually unstoppable machine falter? Inside, fear gripped the ranks, not of Shamanov, but of higher repercussions. Loyalists scrubbed mentions of his name, leaving voids where once roars resided. Even famed figures like Delimkin held back, sensing a storm beyond control. Kadyrov, once unleashed on critics, now hid in mutism, as if an unseen hand flicked off the switch. What if the backlash came not from foes but from within? Veterans struck back, raw and real, their faces etched with wear from front lines. No staged production, their words raw, voices hoarse with righteous fury. They demanded Kadyrov kneel before Shamanov, the honored general, pleading for absolution. Why? For executing presidential orders, restoring order in Chechnya, not alone, but as a commander upholding the state's will. Could this fracture reveal a nation's hidden fractures? The veterans highlighted disparities, Kadyrov's domain drawing 53 billion rubles annually, while the Kursk region scraped by with 4.5 billion. Accusations flew of war profiteering, of exploiting the same forces they vowed to protect. And the demand? If Kadyrov judges Shamanov, then judge us all. This wasn't dissent, it was a declaration, echoing the army's awakening. Picture the silence after accusations, a calculated mask by Moscow, pretending indifference to the earthquake. But whispers spoke volumes. Kadyrov's empire, built on guarded territories and secret battalions, operated like an empire within an empire, funded under operation guise. Regional powers shivered, fearful of his flag's unfurling. Does such restraint portend deeper betrayals? Echoing the muted response to his son's tragedy, no cries, just cold release, the same pattern emerges, Kadyrov untouchable, his web of loyalists guarding every inch. Yet, Insiders reveals a civil war brewing, army versus Chechen stronghold, with the Kremlin teetering. Shamanov, grounded in pure service, warns of the army's pure roots eroding into something else. As divisions widen. What shadow maneuvers lurk in the dark? In the fierce arena of Russian power dynamics, tension rises between two formidable figures, General Vladimir Shamanov, a celebrated hero of past wars, and Ramzan Kadyrov, the headstrong leader of Chechnya. Once, the clash was hidden beneath layers of fear and respect. Now, it's an open battlefield where words wield monumental weight. Shamanov, known for his fierce leadership during the Chechen Wars and his dedication to Russia's military honor, has emerged as a vocal critic of Kadyrov. He boldly challenges Kadyrov's authority, pointing out the suffering of the Chechen populace during the wars. Shamanov's accusation that Kadyrov needs to think before the court shakes the establishment. However, Kadyrov does not cower. Despite his usual aggressive demeanor, this time he responds defensively. He recalls the devastation inflicted upon Chechnya, the pain that lingers where cities once stood. Yet, he conveniently sidesteps the truth that his forces acted under the directives of the Kremlin. His attempts to provoke Shamanov into a physical confrontation are shadowed by a disquieting silence. Kadyrov hints, maybe even taunts, let this hero go to the front, but there's no challenge behind it, just a calculated restraint. Strikingly, the expected backlash from Kadyrov's supporters fails to materialize. Days pass in eerie quiet, with the media and Chechen voices unusually muted, as if a collective breath has been held tight. Kadyrov makes one statement and then retreats from further discussion. Not a soul dares to speak publicly against Shamanov, no fiery posts or visceral outbursts flood the online forums. It's a haunting tranquility that marks a significant shift. Why has the usual fervor of Kadyrov's side vanished into thin air? A sense of dread permeates the atmosphere. The battlefield is no longer defined by loyalty to a figurehead but rather a fear of internal strife that no one wants to provoke. In this newfound silence, who truly holds the power, the feared Kadyrov or the revered Shamanov? As tension envelopes both leaders, they remain in the eye of a storm. But quiet before the next storm looms ominously. What will happen when the world watches as two men, both armed with their own versions of truth, prepare to face off? Will the silence shatter with shocking revelations, or does it conceal deeper, more dangerous currents stirring just beneath the surface? In a chilling turn of events, the long-established dynamics within the Russian military and Chechen leadership began to unravel dramatically. The silence that once enveloped critiques of Chechen leader Kadyrov now seemed to echo with defiance. It wasn't merely a pause, it was a shift in power dynamics, reflecting a growing discontent among those who had once feared speaking out. As whispers of discontent grew louder, many wondered, what happens when the generals decide to voice dissent? Loyal journalists from Chechen media, once wary of mentioning Shamanov, suddenly appeared to retract their statements, skirting around the general's name. It led to an eerie stillness, a visible absence of the usual propaganda machinery. Even notable voices, like Dalim Khan, who had previously taken bold stances, now seemed muted. This change signified a profound shift within the system, a newfound courage to question the status quo. The fears had shifted, no longer were they afraid of Shamanov, but of the repercussions from Kadyrov's higher authorities. The atmosphere grew tense, like the stillness before a storm. As Kadyrov attempted to assert control, the soldiers and veterans, whose voices had been stifled, began speaking out without fear. A video emerged of officers articulating their grievances against Kadyrov, filled with raw emotion. Their voices were thick with weariness and anger, laying bare their frustrations. "We're veterans, soldiers of the armed forces, and we are outraged by Kadyrov's willingness to let the general beg for forgiveness," they declared. "What has he done to deserve such humiliation?" they questioned. Their outrage surged, powerful and undeniable. As veteran after veteran expressed their disdain, the implications became clear. They were no longer just soldiers following orders, they had become a voice against what they perceived as betrayal. The tension escalated as they pointed fingers at Kadyrov for his extravagant spending, a staggering 53 billion rubles, compared to the meager 4.5 million rubles allocated to the Kursk region. Here lay the crux of their indignation: a leader ostensibly chosen to represent them was instead reveling in excess, bereft of accountability. Where is the government in all this turmoil? As doubts surfaced about Kadyrov's reign, the veterans' accusations became terrifyingly clear. They felt he was abandoning the very principles they had fought to uphold. Would this mark a turning point in the fight for justice within the strife-ridden region? One could only sense the air thick with dread, a silent vow among soldiers refusing to be silenced any longer. The shockwaves of this rebellion against a symbol of authoritarian rule were palpable. Would Kadyrov respond to this uprising, or would he remain ensconced in his fortress? In a recent conflict brewing under the surface of power dynamics in Russia, two formidable figures find themselves at odds: Kadyrov and General Shamanov. This confrontation isn't just a clash of personalities, it's a seismic shift in a monolithic system that has kept its secrets for far too long. For the first time in decades, generals like Shamanov are speaking out, instilling both fear and admiration across the ranks. Shamanov, a decorated hero of the Chechen War and a living legend among airborne troops, spoke boldly into the microphone, accusing Kadyrov of trampling on the integrity of the Russian army. The air was thick with tension as he recalled the sacrifices made by soldiers who fought in the brutal landscape of Chechnya. With powerful delivery, he challenged Kadyrov's authority, drawing a line in the sand, a moment where the loyalty of veterans hung in the balance. Conversely, Kadyrov, the head of Chechnya, found himself defending his actions under a harsh spotlight. Once revered for his outspoken independence, he now finds himself cornered, grappling with accusations that cut deep. His claims of the Chechen people's pain echoed in the chamber, yet he seemed to overlook the broader implications of Shamanov's remarks. In a stunning twist, Shamanov's statements became a rallying cry within the military community. Soldiers and veterans rallied behind him, voicing their frustrations against Kadyrov, seemingly unafraid of the repercussions. Voices filled the airwaves, issuing warnings that they would no longer be silenced. Enough is enough, they declared. The tide had shifted, and with it, the silent solidarity that once shielded Kadyrov was crumbling. Why was there an unsettling quiet from Kadyrov's camp? For the first time, no retaliatory video surfaced. No pompous displays of power, only a calculated silence that spoke volumes. Those around him began to retreat into whispers, perhaps realizing that Kadyrov's brand of defiance had lost its edge. Even those loyal to him opted for discretion over defiance. Had Kadyrov's bravado finally crumbled under the weight of mounting opposition? His fighters, once emboldened to act with impunity, now realized they'd awakened a sleeping giant. The struggle was more profound than mere rivalry, it was a question of allegiance, of honor, and the true cost of their loyalty. As the narrative unfolded, it became evident that Kadyrov's grip on power was not as unshakable as once believed. The silence was deafening, signaling a potential shift in the balance of power. With veterans now openly criticizing him, Kadyrov found himself at a crossroads. Would he adapt or double down on an outdated approach? This internal strife illustrated a battle not just for territory, but for the very soul of the Russian military, caught in a web where bravery and betrayal dance perilously close. In what would come next, could the collective cries of the veterans finally compel Kadyrov to reassess his tactics? Would Shamanov's audacity spark a revolution from within the ranks? The stage was set for a monumental confrontation that would determine the future of leadership and loyalty in a country at the brink of transformation. In a landscape reshaped by conflict, a fierce clash looms: Vladimir Shamanov, a decorated general, and Ramzan Kadyrov, the controversial leader of Chechnya. This isn't just a personal feud, it's a seismic shift in authority that has reverberated across Russia. An unexpected dynamic is emerging, with generals voicing their defiance against long-silenced fears. From afar, you can almost feel the tension, thick in the air, as Shamanov, hailed as a hero of the Chechen wars, stands at a podium. His voice, steady yet powerful, cuts through the fog of uncertainty, questioning Kadyrov's actions, while Chechen forces eagerly watch. The moment is symbolic. Where once generals feared for their lives, now they begin to reclaim their voices, sounding an alarm for the military and the nation at large. Both men represent different facets of power in Russia. Shamanov symbolizes military honor and resilience, revered across generations, while Kadyrov embodies a controversial resilience, known for his control and allegiance to the Kremlin. The clash signifies much more than personal ambitions, it lays bare the fractures within the very fabric of authority. When Shamanov boldly claims that Kadyrov must answer for his governance of Chechnya, it resonates like a thunderclap. But Kadyrov's reaction is muted, his customary fervor stifled, as if wisdom has tempered his wrath, a stark reminder of the tumultuous past that binds them. The response, or lack thereof, turns into a deafening silence, echoing the struggles of those who witnessed the ravages of war firsthand. The stakes are astronomically high. The old order is shaken, fear has morphed into muted rebellion. Generals like Shamanov speak not just for themselves, but for the entire army, confronting the very system that has failed them. They voice concern that loyalty has been twisted into a weapon, wielded against the very men who uphold the flag. Now, as Kadyrov's empire operates beyond traditional lines of command, it risks alienating the very soldiers who once secured his reign. What happens when those who bore the sacrifices of conflict start questioning their leaders? The ramifications could ignite a revolution from within, where silence transforms into an audible roar of dissent, calling for justice, respect, and accountability. As history unfolds, this confrontation is less an isolated skirmish, it could signal a broader reckoning within Russian military and political circles. The path is fraught with peril, as soldiers wrestle with questions of honor and allegiance, grappling with the unsettling reality that perhaps, in their silence, they have become complicit in a system that favors a select few. This tale promises to challenge the conventional narratives. What comes next in this turbulent saga? With a pivotal moment at hand, the balance of power could shift in unimaginable ways, stirring debates about loyalty, power, and the true cost of allegiance. And as the shadows loom, will courage rise to face fear, or will darkness swallow the land? The clock is ticking, and tensions are escalating. What if a single voice from the past could shatter the unbreakable chains of power in modern Russia? Imagine a hero general, forged in the fires of forgotten battles, daring to challenge the untouchable ruler of a turbulent republic, exposing cracks in a system everyone thought was ironclad. This isn't just rivalry, it's a seismic shift where silence screams betrayal. 347 characters, in the heart of Russia's political storm, a legendary figure steps forward, his words echoing like thunder over the Caucasus Mountains. The air thick with tension, you can almost feel the chill of suspicion in the grand halls of power. Vladimir Shamanov, the unbreakable icon of airborne forces, rises in the State Duma. His voice, roughened by years of command, cuts through the murmurs like a sharp wind. Why would a man who once led charges through smoke-filled valleys now risk everything over a map? The districts of Norsky, Shalkovsky, and Starozhkedrinsky, once scarred by conflict, now symbols of healing or erasure? For Shamanov, renaming them isn't paperwork, it's a wound reopened, a slap to the memory of those who fell under his orders. The hall falls silent, breaths held, as he declares the move a betrayal of history's hard-won lessons. No notes, no hesitation, just raw truth. But what happens when a war hero unmasks a leader's ambition? The chamber freezes, deputies shifting uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of unspoken fears pressing down like heavy fog. As the video spreads like wildfire across networks, igniting debates in dimly lit rooms where veterans gather. The response from Chechnya builds like a gathering storm. The scent of intrigue lingers in the air, sharp and metallic. Ramzan Kadyrov, the steadfast guardian of his republic's spirit, fires back with controlled fury. His statement arrives not in roaring videos, but in measured words, accusing Shamanov of past shadows and demanding accountability. Yet, beneath the surface, something feels off. Kadyrov's usual blaze of defiance dims to a flicker. Why hold back the thunder? Days pass in eerie quiet, no rallies, no bold displays, just the echo of restraint. Chechen voices that once amplified every clash now whisper and fade, as if an invisible hand has pulled the strings taut. The nation watches, hearts pounding with anticipation. Is this the end of the untouchable era, or the calm before a fiercer gale? Suddenly, from the front lines, a chorus rises, raw and unfiltered, like the crackle of radios in the dead of night. Veterans, their faces etched with the grit of service, speak out in a video that grips the soul. Officers and soldiers, voices steady yet laced with weary resolve, stand united. They condemn the calls for their hero to kneel, questioning the fairness of judging one man for orders from the highest echelons. The air hums with their frustration, the faint rustle of uniforms a reminder of battles endured. Accusations fly, billions funneled to one region, 53 billion rubles annually, while others scrape by on.